entirely possible that by next year, before the midterms, you'll have U.S. ground troops in Iran. So I'm sort of taken aback by how fast things are moving along.
This just in, it's big. A U.S. official telling Fox thousands of Iraqi Kurds have launched a ground offensive in Iran. Decimated, destroyed, defeated. All words the Pentagon used to describe Iran's various military forces.
So in this class this semester, I'm making 3 big predictions, right? First is that Trump will win in November. Second is that the United States will go to war against Iran. And the third big prediction is that the United States will lose this war, which will forever change the global order.
And so we are seeing right now that ground offensive has already begun.
Hugely significant indeed. Kurdish forces start movements against Iran. Jonathan Conricus, your take on exactly that, the significance of a move like this and the timing right now.
But Iran showing it still has the power to fight. Tehran releasing this video, showing off an arsenal of drones and missiles still capable of striking neighbours.
The process that has begun will soon reach Europe if countries think that they can sit safely in a corner until this conflict ends and then take a share of it. They are gravely mistaken. The fire of this war is highly contagious and will engulf the entire world.
While cautious, some of America's traditional allies are preparing for a wider war. Greece is sending 2 frigates, France deploying an aircraft carrier group, 2 more frigates to the eastern Mediterranean. From the UK, HMS Dragon, its most advanced destroyer, due in Cyprus in a week. Qatar says it took down 2 Iranian fighter jets in its airspace and 98 ballistic missiles. British ground troops stationed in Iraq also downed drones. Its RAF jets already in the air, shooting down attack drones over Jordan and Qatar. Israel is fighting on a different front. Pummeling Beirut, targeting Iranian proxy Hezbollah.
Well, it's obviously designed to apply pressure on the Iranian regime. It is to signal to the Iranian regime that there will be pressure coming from various locations, from various ethnic groups. To put things into historic perspective, the Kurds are a large minority in Iran, but they're not the only large minority. Like them, there are the Baluchis in the southeast, the Azeris in the northeast, and other big ethnic groups that probably already are in some stages of similar development. I think we could assess this ahead of time that the Kurds would be first because they are by far the most organized and they have a history of bearing arms and fighting for themselves. And I think this is designed mostly by the US to apply pressure on the regime. Now, to put it to contain it a little bit, I think we shouldn't expect things that the Kurds are not capable of. This isn't an expeditionary force. They do not have the logistics or the manpower or the skill or technology to maneuver across lots of terrain and to present a military threat on Tehran or other centers of gravity of the Iranian regime. But definitely it will present pressure and it will perhaps bring or motivate other groups in Iran to do the same thing, again, with the desired outcome to apply pressure on the regime. Now, the big question is, how will the Iranian regime respond? Will they respond by lashing out and actually engaging, allocating resources and fighting and with a lot of stress to it? Or will they make the smarter decision, kind of contain the situation and try to focus on other things that they have that are more burning? So far, the Iranian regime hasn't really managed this operation very well, so it'll be very interesting to see how they respond to this new threat.
Certainly is a fascinating development.
I watched a video of yours recently, and you talked about how Iran's objective, in order for it to have the advantage over the United States, is to bait them into a ground war. Obviously, after the Iraq War, that's like the dumbest mistake the United States could make, but you argue that it could still happen. How and why is that the case? If that is, like, it's not that, I can't imagine the U.S. doing something against its own interests. Of course it can. But something as catastrophic as putting troops on the ground in Iran, that is very surprising to hear. So how and why do you see that being a possibility?
Yeah, so I use game theory analysis in order to make predictions. So I'm looking at the different actors in the region. Israel, Saudi Arabia, the United States, Iran are the four major actors. And I'm trying to figure out how they benefit as this game progresses. So if you're the United States, then you definitely want to cement control over the Middle East for both trade purposes and for resources, right? Because Iran is basically the center of the world. If you control Iran, you control all global trade. You negate BRICS, you negate Belt and Road, okay? You basically isolate Russia and China. So from a strategic, geopolitical perspective, the United States definitely wants control of Iran. But if you're Israel and you're Saudi Arabia, you don't want to become a vassal to the American empire. You don't want to become a proxy. You don't want to lose your sovereignty, especially Israel, because the entire point of the nation of Israel is to assert Jewish sovereignty, which they believe to be the biblical right. So in order for that to happen, the United States needs to be destroyed. The United States needs to lose a ground war against Iran. So Saudi Arabia and Israel are both heavily invested in seeing a U.S. ground invasion. And if you watch my previous videos, you will know that Saudi Arabia and Israel are politically very strong in Washington, D.C. They spend a lot of money. They spend a lot of resources. They've co-opted a lot of politicians. Donald Trump has a direct line to both Saudi Arabia and Israel through his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. And Donald Trump has always maintained strong relations with Saudi Arabia. Like, where was his first foreign trip overseas in the second term? Saudi Arabia, right? So Saudi Arabia has a much more influence in the Trump White House than we imagine. So both Israel and Saudi Arabia want to see a ground war. Iran wants to see a ground war as well. And there are certain steps that Iran can take to slowly provoke a ground war. If Iran at any point were to close off the Strait of Hormuz, then that will compel a ground invasion in order to reopen that Strait of Hormuz. Obviously, if Iran were to close the Strait of Hormuz, that would collapse the entire global economy, right? Southeast Asia depends on the Middle East for its oil. The Middle East needs to export its oil to be economically viable. So Iran has a series of maneuvers, a series of steps to compel a ground invasion. And the last thing that I will say is the United States military has become an imperial bureaucracy. It doesn't really have strategic foresight. It doesn't really do strategic planning anymore. It's very reactive. It's very intent on maintaining its hegemony. It doesn't really look forward. And at the end of the day, let's just say the United States loses a ground war against Iran. What are the consequences? Well, the major consequences is you have these very unpleasant congressional testimonies in Washington, D.C., where the U.S. military is harangued by congressmen. That's about it. I mean, it's not a big deal if the United States loses a ground war in Iran. But you have these very powerful actors that want to compel a ground war. And that's why, using game theory, I think a ground war is more likely than it is not.
The Secretary of War says it's just the beginning.
We are just getting started. We are accelerating, not decelerating. Iran's capabilities are evaporating by the hour, while American strength grows fiercer, smarter, and utterly dominant. More bombers and more fighters are arriving just today. We can sustain this fight easily for as long as we need to.
The White House reporting more than 17,000 Americans have returned home safely from the Middle East and repeating the president's motivation for the operation.
This is a rogue terrorist regime that has been threatening the United States, our allies, and our people for 47 years. This is a president who has been remarkably consistent on this issue, that Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. And the president tried peace through diplomacy, exhaustively and extensively. He and his team gave it their best go, and the president ultimately came to the determination of that peace was not a pursuable path. The Iranian regime, they want death, they want destruction, they want to kill Americans, and that's unacceptable to this president. It's intolerable to him as commander-in-chief.
Today, it appears he is closer to that goal after an American submarine sunk Iran's prized ship with a torpedo. It's one of the few instances of a sub doing so since World War II.
3 big predictions. 1, that Trump would win. 2, that he would start a war with Iran. And 3, that the U.S. would lose that war. It's quite a stunning prediction. Do you stand by it?
The reality is that right now, it's a war of attrition between the United States and Iran. And the Iranians have been preparing 20 years for this conflict. And now they have a pretty good strategy of how to weaken and ultimately destroy the American empire. So what the Iranians are doing is they're waging war against the entire global economy. And so they are striking the GCC countries. They're going after the critical energy infrastructure. They blocked off the Strait of Hormuz. And eventually, they will go after the water desalination plants, which is the lifeblood of these nations because they don't have fresh water supply. The Iranians are actually threatening the very existence of Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar. And why this is important is that the Gulf states are really the linchpin of the American economy. So what they do is they sell petrodollars and then they recycle the petrodollars back into the American economy through the investments in the stock market. And right now, we know that the entire American economy is propped up by AI investments in data centers. And a lot of that comes from the Gulf states. So if the Gulf states are no longer able to sell oil and they're no longer able to finance AI, this AI bubble in the United States, then this AI bubble will burst, and with it will burst as well the entire American economy, which is really a financial Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, sir, an Amazon data center was literally hit in the UAE. Now, we also wanted to talk to you about munition. The United States is racing to accomplish Iran mission before munitions run out.
The United States military is not designed to fight a 21st century war. Remember, the military-industrial complex came to being after World War II, and it was designed to fight the Cold War. And the Cold War was really about muscle flexing, who was to first get the person on the moon. And so the entire American military strategy revolves around very sophisticated technology that costs a lot of money to build. And that's what the American air defense system is. And that's why we're seeing this asymmetry in this war, where you have these $1 million missiles trying to take out these $50,000 drones. And it's not sustainable in the long term. And so what we're seeing is really the puncturing of the aura of invincibility that sustained American hegemony for the past 20 years.